Our guest tonight, as you all know, Bob Ryan. We are honored to have him here. And when we're preparing to do this, I wanted to find out, I know all of you know that he spans decades of with so much respect and so much credibility. My 83-year-old father said, I can't believe Bob Ryan's coming to the library. And my 18-year-old son said, I can't believe Bob Ryan's coming to the library. So that gives you a little idea of who this man is. So I will let him speak for himself. Please welcome Bob Ryan.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you all for coming out. My fellow Americans, I think we better focus on that aspect. That's it. That's the end of the evening. We'll talk a little bit about the book and what's in it and what it means to me. And I want to just explore a little bit about the idea of what our unifying bond is here tonight. And I'm going to assume it is simply the simple fact that we are all sports fans. And sports means something to us. It's brought some joy, enjoyment and value to our lives. And I don't know if you've ever actually thought about the nature of it. What is it? Why? What is this thing? Why are we so enthralled with all this? It seems to me that there are essentially 6 types of what I would call leisure pursuits for people who are fortunate enough to have leisure pursuits, which I'm going to assume includes everyone fortunate enough to be in that situation in this room. And in no particular order or weighted of importance. We got books, reading. I'm a big reader. If you come to my house, you would say, where or aren't there any books? There's books. My wife and I are great readers, and we all enjoy a great book and know the feeling of wishing that a book that we really enjoy were 2 or more pages, so but that goes without saying. Okay, there's art. I'm not an expert, I'm not an aficionado in any way, but I'm a sucker for impressionists. Okay, you give me a great impressionist showing, and I want to be there. I just went up to Peabody Essex Museum to see the Child Hassan exhibit that's been going on there. So that you include that. You have theater naturally. I went to the theater last night in Boston. Movies, of course, and music, and the two that are quite allied that I think people have oftentimes the most connection of sports and music. They seem to go hand in hand in many ways, and for people, a lot of the sports associations that we have are connected with music. On music songs we remember, and I can still remember what was #1 when I was riding from BC down to College Park, Maryland in 1967 to see the Eastern Regional, and I can tell you right now, and you can look it up, and the #1 song was Jimmy Mac by Martin Vandellas, so there you go. But music, all kinds of music. And of course, finally, there is sport. Now, I have a little pet peeve, and that is this casual declaration that's been in vogue over the last 20 or 30 years that, well, sports is just entertainment, after all. Well, no, it is not just entertainment. It's vastly different than entertainment for the very simple reason that, by and large, sports is not scripted and entertainment is. And so when you go to a concert of your favorite artist, as a rule, there are always experts that want something. You don't want to be surprised. You want to be validated. You want them to sing the songs that you want the way that they were on the record. You're not looking for any improvisation, as a rule. Now, jazz, I'm going to that, but we're talking about, and I'm a jazz guy, mainstream jazz, but I understand that concept. But you know what I'm saying. You go to hear Springsteen, you don't want to messing around with Born to Run. You want it the way you know it. You know it and I know it. That's the truth. Okay. But sport, the great thing about sport is you don't know. You've got to play the game. And can I give you no better example than the Super Bowl once removed? I don't get those numbers wrong. What number was that? I don't know, 40, whatever. All right, whatever, fine. I don't know the numbers, but I know the game. And we're talking about the Celtics. We're talking about the Patriots against Seattle. And we're talking about the fact that Tom Brady, as he had done in the same building 7 years earlier, handed the lead over to his defense and said, get him off the field, let's all get ready to go celebrate, we're going to win the Super Bowl. And now, all of a sudden, there's this pass down on the 6-yard line, and your curse is laying on his back, catching the ball, very similar to the way that Tyree had caught the ball 7 years ago. In the same building, by the way. And the camera cuts to Brady on the sideline, and he's got this look of horror, of sheer horror on his face. And what that look is saying, God, I cannot believe this is happening again. That's it. I used to think there was a God, but now I'm not so sure, you know? Okay, so, first down, Lynch takes the ball to the 1-yard line, and we know the game's over. You know, everyone in this room who's watching that game, I can't believe it. We're going to lose this game. We're going to lose this game, and I know that we're losing this game in the same building. Now let's just step back, take a deep breath. As a sports fan, and all I'm about to talk about is you're all processing this in seconds. Okay, you know the context of all this. You know that. Oh, by the way, who's the coach of the Seahawks? It's Pete Carroll. Wasn't he the coach of the Patriots once upon a time? Yes. Wasn't he fired because he was deemed unworthy, the team was going backwards every year? Answer is yes. Okay, trust me on that one. Who succeeded him? Oh, that would be Bill Belichick. And so that's A. You know all this. It's B. All right. So now it's down on the 1-yard line, and you know the game's over, and you know you're ready to. I mean, you're ready for the pity party. You're ready. Oh my God, it's going to be awful. And then all of a sudden, what? They're going to pass, and then who's Malcolm Butler? Because I know I didn't know at that moment. Okay. So we've got this phenomenal juxtaposition of emotion, and of tension, and of just human feeling, right? That now, why do I make a big deal out of this? And because it speaks to the difference between the sport and the entertainment. I love music. I've been to concerts I love. I've been to artists I love. I've had some extraordinary evenings, including one with Springsteen back in Worcester in the Tunnel of Love tour. The only time I ever saw him in person. And I'm not a huge Springsteen guy, but I walked away very impressed. It was 3.5 hours of his incredibly inexhaustible energy and his music. It was fine. But it pushes a certain button in you, just as the literature does, the art does, the film does, the theater does. But it isn't the same. And we want to say that all 6 of these possible sensations are equal, fine. But if you don't know to be a sports fan, if you're not one, and there is no way, and I know because I think I understand those other 5, anything that is available in those other 5 produces that type of sensation, pushes that button within you. Now, in order to appreciate it, of course, you have to have background. You have to have context. You have to know about who the Patriots are and who the Seahawks are and what the season was like and who the coach is and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, but you do know all these things if you're a sports fan, and you bring all this and you process all this instantaneously, and then that moment comes and Carroll makes the decision. It's going to have, in his first paragraph of his obituary, Pete Carroll, who made the dumbest decision in the history of the Super Bowl, and he has to live with this. And that is going to be the case. And he has to live with this. But, all right, that's another matter. But the point is, you see what I'm saying? Sport pushes that button. That is why we love sport. The uncertainty, we could go over chapter and verse and just conclude a World Series. We could go over chapter and verse of how Joe Madden, who I think is a wonderful manager and who had a great year and gotten him there, had a brain, I won't use the F word, but I'll say cramp, okay? Brain cramp, and did 2 stupid things. In the 6th game, he brings in Chapman with a 5-1 lead. A 5-1 lead, doesn't have to do it. Now he brings in Chapman and takes Hendricks out in the 7th. Point being, he's handing this game over to the Indians, and he gets bailed out. David Ross, who's only in the game because Lester's brought in the game, hits a home run in his final game, and then Zobrist hits a double to bring in the go-ahead run, and he takes Joe Madden off the hook, and so you go from the fear of, if you're a Cub fan, of them losing to winning, or if you're an Indian fan, vice versa. Point being, there's no comparable circumstance in music, and I love music. There is no, it just isn't the same. So I'm just going to use this as a preface before I talk about the nature of this book and what this book was all about. That's why we're here. We love sports. And I don't think a lot of people have ever actually analyzed why. They just know, oh, I like this. But that is, I'm telling you, that's part of the reason why we love the sport. It's the uncertainty and it's all this other stuff that produces a conversation. I mean, we spend more time talking about sports than we ever do watching it, just for an obvious reason. But that's part of the fun. That's why talk radio exists. But even if there were no talk radio, it's why Cracker Barrels existed in the old days. People talk, have this common bond to talk about. There's so much you can digest and analyze. And let's face it, I talked about the art, the art. Okay, fine. we know that there are phenomenal crowds that accrue whenever, in fact, there is a Monet or a Renoir exhibition put on. But are people standing around the next day in the office talking about it? No, they're not. They want to talk about it with brushstroke. No, come on, stop. It's not happening, and we all know it. Doesn't mean it wasn't a wonderful experience, but when they walk out of that museum on that afternoon, that's the end of it, right? But that isn't the end of it when you're a sports fan, and forget about whether you're a bettor or anything else. So that's all. I just want to throw that one out there, a little food for thought. Now, this book, Scribe, it's my 13th book, and it wasn't intended to be, and the reason it came to be is kind of interesting. I would be highly disingenuous if I were to suggest that at no point during my career, 44 years at the Globe, that I had not thought about writing a book. I mean, there's an ego factor there, there's quite clearly, that you think maybe I've got a story to tell. But I kind of talked myself out of it on the basis of having seen some other writers who I thought had a lot to offer and things to say, put out books of this nature, and they didn't do so well. So I said, oh, you're flattering yourself, nobody cares. Well, two strokes of good fortune produced this book for me. The first one was, I was approached about, my God, almost bordering on 5 years ago, by an agent named Andrew Blauner. Andrew is a general agent who has sports clients, but he's not exclusively a sports agent. He's a New Yorker, born and bred Manhattanite, and went to Brown. And he happened to be at Brown during the height of the Bird era in the mid-'80s. And in so doing, he became a reader of the Globe and also a reader of mine. I was on the beat in the middle, for part, I came back to the beat in '86. And he became a fan of mine, apparently. And he approached me about doing the book and said he really thought it was viable. And I knew he has a very good reputation in the business. He was quite a quality guy. And I was flattered, and I said, well, if Andrew thinks it's viable, let's do it, fine. Now, when Andrew went to shop the book around the publishers, he walked in one day to Bloomsbury Publication in New York City. Well, it just so happened that the guy who was the cheese, calling all the shots, he's the chief editor and publisher of Bloomsbury, his name is George Gibson. Well, it just so happened that in 1989, I worked with George Gibson on a prior book for Addison Wesley. That ring a bell for anybody up here in this area? It very much. It was a book on the Celtics, and George edited that book. Now we had no contact in the ensuing. At that point, it was 27 years. We had no. It took me 24 years. We had no contact whatsoever, George and I. But when I walked in that room, George and I hit it off again, and George was the guy who raised his hand, I'll take the book, I'll do the book. He made a nice offer, more than I expected, frankly, and said, we'll do the book. So that's the two reasons how the book actually came into being. Now, in the course of it, I became good friends with George, and it was unlike any other book writing project I had ever had. George wasn't originally intending to be the editor of this book. He had another younger gentleman that was going to edit it, but he left to go to take another job. And George said, oh, I'm going to take charge of this book myself. I'm going to edit it myself. So in the course of the editing, after I submitted the manuscript, he twice came to my house. I live in Hingham. And he drove up and we stayed overnight. He stayed overnight at my house. This is not the normal publishing MO. No, I was quite flattered. But he invested. This told me he was invested in this book. And that was so reassuring and so comforting. And obviously it boosted my confidence and this made me feel damn good. He was really invested in this book. It wasn't just a professional obligation. It was he made it very personal. Because he's quite an erudite chap, but he is a big sports fan, big Celtic fan, NBA, knows it very well, and loves sports, and knows his sports. Harvard guy, and anyway. So George mother-handed the book, and he did a phenomenal editing job because he was able to take something that was in this chapter and say, I think it would be better in this chapter. So without me writing a word, but just rearranging the furniture, a little feng shui or something, he was able to shape it, and that's what a great editor does. He made me better than I was. It's a better book because it was George's vision. So I'm very, very grateful for that. Obviously, it goes without saying that the book is going to encompass my career experiences. That's the number one thing you want in the book. I was privileged enough to start working for the Globe when I was 23 years old as a summer intern out of BC, and was handed the Celtic beat at age 23, and that opened the doors for everything that eventually happened, including working for ESPN, which I've done now since 1989, straight through on the sports reporters, and now work on 3 different shows on ESPN. And that door was all open because of the Globe, obviously, in the writing. That's all in there. I covered the Celtics for 14 years. I became associated with the NBA. It's expected to be a lot of basketball in there. I'm very proud of my chapter on international basketball. Proud of my Olympic, we'll get to that. So obviously that's in there. But the other thing is, and here's where the ego thing has to be tamped down by an appropriate editor, of course. Does the world really care about my observations or opinions or relating about how I grew up? Well, I thought that the fact that if you care enough to read the book, and you might be interested in how did I get to be me, what forces shape how did I get to have this world view, if you will, and I wanted to pay a little bit of homage to how I grew up and have it commemorated because it's a way that it isn't the way people do it anymore, but most of you, or many of you in the room, I look at the faces and the age, and obviously can relate. The neighborhood idea, the unstructured play idea, the walk out of the house and be for 8 hours and come back maybe for lunch and that's it, and amuse yourself with your friends and the neighborhood idea. That's A, and B, I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey. Now Trenton is an interestingly situated place. It is 35 miles from William Penn Statue in downtown Philly, and 55 miles from Manhattan. And so it is influenced in every way by both of those cities, sports and everything else. And there were 2 competing daily newspapers, and I devoured those newspapers, and they covered both the professional teams and great coverage of the locals. So there was extensive sports coverage. Then when rock and roll hit, in 55 or so, if you want to, however you want to date it, we got this both in New York and a Philadelphia station, so I was able to get absorb all of that too, and not just one. And the biggest thing was television. Now, who knew that Trenton, New Jersey was the television capital of the world in America in the 50s? But it was. Because of that location, we got everything on the dial in Philadelphia, and we got everything on the dial in New York. Now, most people, you grew up in Greater Boston in those days, you had those 3 channels. That's it. I had everything on the dial but 8. There was an 8 in New Haven, there was an 8 in Wilmington. They were kind of fuzzy. Everything else, 2 through 13, were available. And how did this come into play? Well, it came into play with sports. The Giants and the Dodgers and the Yankees were all on television in New York. The Yankees and the Giants on Channel 11. Anybody here from New York? Grew up, right? Yankees and Giants on 11, Dodgers on Channel 9, and Philadelphia, Channel 6, Phillies. And so I got to see access to more Major League Baseball as a fan. I love baseball, growing up in Trenton than you would have in most locales in America. And it was, for me, that was very important, as it turned out. Okay, that's who I was, so I was wired. Now, I was this precocious kid who loved sports and played sports and all that, but in addition to playing them, I was in the sports family. My father was always involved in sports. I do not remember a time in my life, this is literal, not hyperbolic, there was no time in my life in any kind of conscious memory, say age 4 or so, whenever most of us have any kind of conscious memory, when we were not going to a game, getting ready to go to a game, or coming home from a game. Now I'm serious. So people have all these rhapsodic things to talk about. Oh, I remember my first game and walking in and I saw the green and the grass and the da-da-da. Very poetic, very Bart Giamatti and all that. But I don't remember my first Major League game. I went to so many, I have no idea. So whether it was baseball or minor league baseball, we had a minor league team in town, or whether it was college basketball, my father went to Villanova where he was assistant athletic director, or college football. That's my life. Okay, now, in addition to that, I love to read. And I love the printed word, and so I was very conscious of reporting. And so much so that, say my father would take me to a high school basketball game, a very big high school basketball town, Trenton was, on Friday night, Trenton Catholic, that was the great power, and then I couldn't wait till Saturday morning. Why? To pick up the paper, the Morning Trentonian, the tabloid Trentonian, to read about the game. Until I read about the game, it wasn't validated in my mind. It wasn't authenticated. It wasn't real. It didn't have any meaning. Now, most 7-year-olds aren't like that. or even 15-year-olds, but I was like that, just the way I was wired. So that, and so this the whole combination, the family orientation, the town orientation that provided all this fodder, all this data for me, you know, the opportunity. I grew up a little differently, and I wanted to commemorate that. And the whole way of life that we lived is gone. We know that, and it doesn't matter. My kids didn't grow up that way, and yours kids don't grow up that way. Grandchildren don't grow up that way. My God knows my grandchildren don't grow up that way, and you know, and we did. So I thought it was good to get that down. Now, how much of that to put in the book as opposed to the other, you know, the professional thing was the question, and I wasn't sure that I hadn't overdone it, you know, when I submitted the manuscript. But I trusted George Gibson's judgment. And George seemed to sign off on it. He thought it was a pretty good idea. So I did this stuff in there. It may be viewed as self-indulgent, or it may be viewed, some people like it, some people don't care, fine. But a lot of people do like it. So that's why that's in there. The sports things are obviously all self-evident, you know, there's no question. The book now was written 3 years ago and was published in the fall of 14. So, you know, there's one, if there's a do-over or, you know, an addendum, obviously, a lot's happened in the football world since those days. You probably know that. If you want to talk about you-know-what, fine, we'll talk about it, the Deflategate. But, you know, things have happened. That's going to be the case, but nothing can do about that. One thing I'll say, and I'm going to take questions, of course, in closing, is one of the things that the great gratification for me, my father died when I was 11, and my mother took over, and I'm extremely grateful that she recognized how important the sports thing was for me. Now, she liked it herself, and she had married my father after a while, and she knew very well what she was getting into, granted, when they met way back when, right out of high school. So she knew what she was getting into, and she kept it going for me. Like, for example, I came home from a summer camp job in 1962, and she said, we're going to Bridgeton, New Jersey, we're going to the game. And the game happened to be the 1962 Babe Ruth League World Series Championship game in Bridgeton, New Jersey, between Trenton, New Jersey, and Portland, and I forget who it was. She had gotten tickets. She always made sure we had tickets. I took my favorite game, Villanova St. Joe's basketball. She took care, and she was aware, and no. So not only was she not, she could have been hostile for all I know, but she wasn't. She was far from it. She was supportive, and that was really important to me. Another thing I'll tell you is that my father died when I was 11, as I say, and I wanted to do something in the book about him. He was a well-known person in town, in Trenton, and in the course of research, I learned some things about him I didn't even know. And so the last chapter has a lot to do with him, and it's very gratifying to me that I was able, because what I say is the gospel truth. He was a guy who never could get that big break, which he deserved, and I was very lucky to have any number of breaks, I mean, on and on and on. And I'm very grateful for what's happened to me, and I just wanted to have him commemorated for the person he was and the stature that he had in my hometown. One thing I'll just talk about briefly and then go to questions. The process. This was an interesting book for me to write because it was the first book that I was writing in retirement. You know, I officially retired from the Globe full time after the London Olympics, and all the other books I had written had been written, as anybody who's got a full-time job will tell you, they're a nightmare to write. They're not fun. You're writing on nights, holidays, weekends, vacations. It's like a giant term paper hanging over your head all the time, and so it's not fun. But this book, I had a schedule. This was my commitment. This was my #1 priority in life. I'm free. Anything I take on is on my own. So I structured myself for a writing schedule. You know, this is what the authors do. It's what Grisham does. It's what King does. It's what they all do. They get up and they write and they have lunch and they write and they walk the dog and I mean but it's a job. Well, it's a lot less stressful than the other way. I'm sorry, but it is. It was great. I loved it. And I actually structured a 4-day work week, and I tried to structure to do ESPN TV and Comcast on the same day. I called it Make Money Monday. And, got to keep the cash flow going, and that worked out. Everybody was cooperative. They were humoring me by giving me that, and I even worked a few weekends when my wife was out of town. But it was less stressful, so it wasn't the chore, and I think it produced pretty good writing. I think it produced a more relaxed person, and it all worked out. So it was books were not fun, but I must say I was could come closest using the F word, the fun word, to write the book. Although I did like the topic matter. You know, so that too. But all in all, it was the best book writing and publishing experience I ever had. I'm very grateful to Andrew for seeking me out, and I'm grateful to George for everything he did, and I really enjoyed it. Then one final, I know I said final 3 times. This is it, which is funny though. The #1 author lament, and I don't care what the genre is, who the author is, unless you're talking about guaranteed bestseller people that can't miss, like Jeff Kinney has just debuted #1 again with the 9th Wimpy Kid book. I have a grandson who's a phenomenal, devotee of these books. All right, that's a different world. But the rest of us, the other 99.9999%, will tell you, what is the #1 lament? They didn't promote my book. Well, I can't say that Bloomsbury did everything they could to help me. And I was promoted, as well as any author in my level, in my world, could ever ask for. So if the book didn't do anything, it was on me. And I couldn't blame anybody else. And that was fair. That all being said, whatever way you'd like to take the conversation, I'm very happy to take it. Yes?
I read Scribe and I enjoyed it very much. And I'm glad to see you still writing in the Globe, because that's one of the reasons I look for the Sunday Globe.
Thank you.
Just like you used to look for the Trentonian 40 years ago or whatever. Can you talk about how the relationship, how the NBA has changed over the years, and the relationship between reporters, beat reporters, and the players, these days, especially when they're like mini corporations?
The whole world is so vastly different in terms of the interaction of the media and in that league specifically, because the access is restricted. It's not the same. When I was able to go to practice from start to finish, I would arrive at practice roughly an hour before start, just sit around and talk, no notebook. You get to know the players, you know their wives and their kids' names, and their brothers' names, and become accessible as a human being. Then when we traveled, we literally traveled with them. We flew with them. We arrived at the airport. We got on the bus to go to the hotel with them. Maybe go out to eat with them. Ride the bus to the game with them. Back after the game, repeat this on and on. They got used to it as people. They didn't view you as some alien species, and it wasn't inherently an adversarial effect. Now, you have to maintain some kind of professional distance because you have to be critical. You have to be able to critique, but you can manipulate that if they're reasonable and accept a little constructive criticism, shall we say, and a fair appraisal, and recognize they're not going to be great every night, and all you're doing is you're not vilifying them as people. You're just simply assessing the game. Not everybody takes it the same way, but by and large, if you have good people, you can navigate this, and I think I was able to do that because I had the good people that you need. All right. But today, it's all different. Everybody charters, everybody, so you don't travel with them at all, and practices are restricted. You're lucky if you can get in to see the final 10 or 15 minutes when they're just doing things like shooting free throws. Then you have a very rushed and stilted interview time of however many minutes, and you don't socialize in that. You're not thrown together. We would have these delays, flight delays. We're going to the West Coast, and by the way, the flight's delayed 2 hours. What do? Go to the bar. We're sitting in the lounge. We talk to them. You don't travel anymore. Those downtimes are gone. So the access and so there's an inherent wall, and then I always say the two worst things that ever happen to destroy the relationship of or to alter in a negative manner the relationship, specifically talking about basketball now, is A, the charter flights, and B, the Chicago Bulls. Because the Chicago Bulls became like a traveling rock circus with stars, with security and all, and a very, very rigid control of their practice area. And they built a new practice area, and you couldn't even see their parking lot. You didn't even know it was there and it wasn't there. It was screaming out, we hate you, or you're a problem for us. We don't want anything to do with you. And I didn't live in that era. So there's no way that anybody today will have the kind of relationships and have as much fun, I think, as we had in those days. I'm very grateful. I always say, I'll say it 100 times, I'm grateful I did it when I did it and where I did it, in this town specifically. And I'll say another thing, that if I could turn the clock back to January 1st, 1980, to January 31st, 1989, and relive everything that happened professionally, everything, good, bad, and different. I do it again. I love it. It was such a great era, and it was a golden era for us. And you ask anybody that lived through it, and I think they'll echo that sentiment. So it's changed. Now the sports are all different. Football was always difficult because you don't go in there before the game. Football's relationships were always a little more difficult to get. Baseball was always the best because you had this unlimited time before the game, and you did travel with them as well. Now, but you don't travel with them anymore, and they restricted the locker room time dramatically in baseball. And hockey, you didn't go in there before a game, as you did in basketball, but you did travel with them. But it was vastly different, and it's too bad. I mean, I loved it. I'm just so grateful I did it when I did it. Yes?
I'd like to follow up with that comment you just made about the 80 to 89 period of time. So I was born in the 70s, I grew up in the 80s, and it wasn't until 88, 89 that I realized the Celtics weren't going to win a championship. And the year that Bird was out,
Yeah.
and I believe that was the year you guys co-wrote his autobiography?
Yeah,
Is that right?
that book came out in 88, 89 season.
Right. I'm wondering if he was having the problem with his heel at the time? And I'm wondering if you could talk about what it was like writing with him during his downtime.
Sure.
He must have been
Well, when we, he came up, Bob Wolf was his agent. And he came up to me at a social gathering at the 1987 All-Star game in Seattle, and said, "Larry's ready to do a book. We'd like you to do the book." Okay, sounds good to me. And so at 87, so I went and spent time with Larry in the summer of '87 in French Lick. And with the way you do these things as a rule, the logistics are reasonably the same when you're doing a book with somebody. You have to carve out the time to sit there with them. You talk, you have your questions ready, you have your talk, and you do your homework, and you take these conversations. Conversations get transcribed, and then you write, and you keep as close to the voice, keep as much verbatim as you can, but you do what you do to keep their voice, but you're the writer. And so that's what I did with Larry. I spent an entire week in French Lick. And we had a great week, and then went home and did the process and got the book the tapes transcribed and did the book. The Globe made the decision that because the book was coming out in '88, '89, conflict of interest, kind of thing, which was bogus, but okay, fine. I already written the book. I mean, and so they took me off the beat, and Jackie McMullen came on, which is fine for her. And it's fine for the reader. But so there was no issue that year when the book was out, except Larry was not able to promote it in any way, and when whatever. But once again, we had nowhere near the level of promotion. We didn't, but it obviously was the best-selling book I ever had because it was Larry Bird's book, obviously. We didn't, so it took care of itself. But who knows what it would have done if Larry could have promoted it. But anyway, so that's the story. That's how it was done. And but you're right. That season, '88, '89, he got hurt. That was when he threw the heels out. And poor Jimmy Rogers is the new coach, and he doesn't have Larry. It was tough, very tough. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I know you mostly do basketball, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about baseball and covering a baseball season. 162 games, every single day of the week, 6 days a week, and so forth, like that. Just talk a little bit about what that's
Great
like both
question.
for a writer and for the athlete.
Great question. If you cover football, hockey, or basketball, it's a demanding job. If you cover baseball, it's a lifestyle. And I did it one full season, as it turned out, it was 1977. And I probably did 130 games, plus half a spring training, and then the World Series, and then the postseason, which was the playoffs in the World Series. And I can remember coming home, on a trip from the Midwest where 3, 4 in the morning. Or I remember once I came in, I was walking back at 5 o'clock in the morning, and my neighbor who worked in a flower district in Boston was going out to work, and I was coming in. I thought that was kind of funny that day. But that's and then by the way, maybe back at the ballpark the next night. And although it depends on how a paper wants to approach it, how hard they want to work their primary guy. But I did about 130 games that year, and that's about standard, I guess. It's totally different, and I love baseball, and you can love it, but after a while, sometimes by game 88, or 134, your enthusiasm may have waned a little bit, and the season is not going well. or if it's really not going well and it's going to be tense atmosphere in that clubhouse, can be a very intimidating place, in the wrong. Hello. Hello. That clubhouse can be a very intimidating place. But that's a great question. Baseball's different. It is very different. I mean, I did basketball many a year, and you get a little, your mind, you get a little weary, and you have to fight through stuff. February's a tough month. There's no question. It just seems to be that way. But if you're with a good team and once you hit the playoffs, I remember once I worked like 42. I remember it was 42 straight days, or something, in one year. Well, of course, the Globe was great because we had an IOU system, which meant summer was great. I was see you later. But 42 straight days, I remember once in the playoffs. Every off day, every travel. But I loved it. It was great. The Celtics were the Celtics, and it was great. But baseball, oh boy. And if you multiply that, guys that do it 15, 20 or more years, I always say I don't know how they do it, but I admire them. You really gotta love it. Gotta love it. Yes.
I just wanted to follow up on the Celtics conversation of the mid-'80s.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've heard you say, either on the Sports Reporters or even written it, that you think that the '86 team is the best of all
I do.
time. And I agree with that. I try to tell my son that, but he doesn't get it. Is there anything that went on behind the scenes there on that team that you can share that hasn't already been visited? I know Walton was the big sixth man and everything,
Yeah.
a big addition.
Once they hit their stride in January, I really think they took the floor every night. Would be shocked if they lost. I think they were expected to win every game. They had such confidence in each other. And the reason I always say is trump card in my argument for that is Wall. Because he changed the game as a sixth man, unlike any other sixth man. And the Celtics, of course, were blessed to have two of the all-time great ones, Havlicek as a sixth man and McHale. And most six men change the game offensively, specifically, most all the time. McHale was able to be a little different. But Walton ordered the game defensively and offensively. He made the second unit a viable unit all by itself because of his incredible passing ability and his rebounding and defense, made that important. And coming on top of what Paris had done as he developed Paris, it was the greatest 1-2 center punch in history of the game. There's never been anything like this. To have a guy like Paris handing the baton over to a guy like Walton at that position. Behind the scenes, it was just, I told some of the stories. Larry was fun to be around naturally, and he was feeling really good that year. Well, the second half of the year, it took him a while. He had to have his back fixed up, but Dan Dyrek, who by the way is the same Dan Dyrek that just worked for the Red Sox and just quit, Dan Dyrek had straightened him out. It wasn't really anything like the great mysteries behind though, but they just enjoyed what they were doing. They were totally confident, and once they hit January, it was such a. And I loved going on the road with them. They just dazzled people on the road. They enjoyed the road. They really loved that wonderful sound of silence that that they could produce. I remember one night in San Antonio, Larry was 10 for 10 at the half. He had 30 at the half, 10 for 10, and people would come up to me, and say, "You see this? You're watching this every night?" I said, "Yeah, that's the way it is." I said, really, it was something. Yes.
When all was said and done, the book was out there, it's all over. Did you have one event or story where you're like, how did I not get that in there?
That's a good question. That's good. I'm trying to think. I'm not sure, because usually what I get asked is, what's the number one thing and all that. And not that I can think of, but I'm going to think about that. Now you're making me think. There's something that I really regretted, because I don't think it was, basketball. I don't think. If anything, it may have been baseball. I mean, there's stuff I saw that how relevant was it? To this Boston or to a national audience, sure. But I'll give you an example of an incident, and I just find it fascinating. And in 1975, I was first exposure I was given to cover a baseball playoff. Okay, I was still covering the Celtics full time, but in the fall, I was sent to do the National League NLCS between Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. And I don't know if you remember that, but that's the height of the Big Red. That's the year they didn't sweep in '75. They swept in '76. But they were up 2-0 on the Pirates in Cincinnati. Now we go to Pittsburgh. And there's a big house in Pittsburgh, and it's a very electrifying. And 21-year-old John Candelaria is pitching for the Pirates. And he's got 14 strikeouts through 7 2/3. He's beating the Reds 2-1. And there's 2 outs and nobody on in the 8th inning. And Merv Rettenman pinch hits. And ball 1 was right there, but he didn't get the call. Ball 2, once again, right there, did not get the call. Ball 3 and 4 were he almost threw 2 wild pitches. So he walked him on 4, but just some between strike 2, ball 2 and ball 3, Candelaria, something happened. He lost it. Now who's on deck? Peter Edward Rose. Now what's he thinking? He's thinking, here's this kid. He's just walked Rettenman in this bizarre manner. What's he going to be thinking? Dead red. He's going to want to throw a first pitch strike if he ever threw a first pitch strike in his life. And Pete Rose teed off with the longest home run I guarantee you he ever hit in his life. And he wasn't a home run hitter, as you well know. But he got a hold of this one. And I just thought it spoke to, the circumstance in a way that it's a great baseball vignette. That's the game they went up winning in 10 innings. Ed Armbrister, a name that became very famous a little bit later, drove in a winning run. But I always loved that, and I just speaks to so many things. Speaks to baseball's interesting dynamic, and it speaks to Pete Rose's mindset. It was fascinating. I don't know. And this is just off the, totally off the top of my head. I don't know if that, but that's one thing that would have been nice to get in there. Yes.
Can you give us your take on Bill Belichick's attitude toward the media?
Mm-hmm. I can. Always keep in mind that Bill Belichick's relentless, unalterable focus is keeping control of the circumstance, the team circumstance. Focus. Okay. When you do have, anything that he thinks is out of bounds or doesn't contribute to the control that he wants and the direction he wants the team to have, he's very good at stonewalling. But what you have to understand, though, is that what you see, like, he added to the lore again, as you know, with yesterday. Seattle. Okay. That fits in his image perfectly. On to Cincinnati last year, that fits, or 2 years ago, that fits in his image fine. But what you don't see is how he changes, gets better as the week goes on. And by Friday, when the work is in, Friday is a going over details day. It's not a hard-hitting day. It's not, and the work's in. He's almost a raconteur, and you just push the right button about football. The number one thing about Bill Belichick, number two thing, I just told you number one thing. Number two thing is that there may be nobody that not only loves football more than him, but knows more about football than Bill Belichick. And when I mean knows more, I mean history as well. I mean all kinds of circumstances. He has this very famous collection of football books. I mean, he may have the largest private collection of football books. Anytime he comes across a football book, he gets a hold of it. He loves football and wants to share his knowledge. Is very happy to discourse on the minutiae of football and the history of football. And some of those Fridays, you'd never recognize that guy. When you see him on Sunday, win or lose, he shouldn't even show up. I mean, seriously, he shouldn't even bother. He's going to be so rude and condescending and stupid, on many Sundays, win or lose. Yeah, it's going to be offense, defense, special teams, 3 bases of the ball. That's as best you can get. And that's the image that is portrayed to the world by the snippets on ESPN and otherwise. And there is much more to him than that, but he doesn't care if he comes off poor. He's doing the job. He loves what he's doing. People would say, how long is he going to go? But as long as he wants. He loves this. He cannot get enough. He loves football, and I respect that. I mean, let me just try. Yes, back there.
How would you handicap David Ortiz's chances of getting in the Hall of Fame?
He will get into the Hall of Fame. I do not believe he will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think that there are two things that he has to worry about, and the first one, of course, is the PED thing. The name on that list will bother some people. He skated away from that as well as anybody could possibly do it, but it will come back to haunt him in some eyes at that point. How many, I don't know. But the biggest thing is the DH thing. The bias against the DH by most of the National League voters, and I give you Edgar Martinez. Edgar Martinez I vote for, most American League voters vote for. We thought he was the best right-hand hitter in the American League for about a 10-year period, certainly the most respected. And he is not only not getting closer, he is actually going backwards. Last year he had fewer votes percentage than he had the year before. That doesn't bode well for Poppy's chances of getting an instant approbation. I think he will get it. His power numbers and his postseason, his persona and all. But I think he'll be made to wait. And how long that wait will be, I don't know. No, if I'm still voting, and that'll be 5 years from now, and there's a very possibility I won't be. But I am still voting, and if he were on a ballot in front of me, he'd get my vote. But I don't think he would get in right now. I just don't. And I think that the DH thing is more of a detriment to his cause than the PP thing. Yes?
How does the rest of the country feel about New England and Boston with the run we've had since 2000 and all the different sports?
Not very well. In general terms, number one, it's bad enough that it's the Patriots, because Belichick is such a bad face for the organization nationally. You remember though, when they won the first Super Bowl, everybody loved the Patriots. They ran out, the 43 guys ran out together, and 40, and all that, and people will love that, and they were a team. They were an upset victor over a favored Rams team. And Brady was a wonderful story, and it was great. Everybody loved the story. But the dialogue has altered over the years. Spygate was crucially bad. It was awful for their image, and they'll never dig out from that image, and they won't. And so many people, I won't say most, but a lot, many millions, will look at them as cheaters and think less of them. And now that's the Patriots. And then, of course, the last Super Bowl, they're lucky that Carroll made a dumb decision, and they weren't. They should have lost that game. So there's that. And then, of course, when you throw in the Red Sox 3 and the Celtics and the Bruins, there's a jealousy aspect of it. People have a perception that the Boston fans are how they say, narcissistic. The Red Sox fans, before the Red Sox won, acted as if nothing bad ever happened to anybody else. I think they felt. We're not very popular. We're just going. So we're just going to have to, tell them too bad. Yes, ma'am.
So, speaking of baseball, when the games go in overtime, I'm always impressed. Like it could go, like 3 extra innings, right? It's 1 o'clock in the morning, and finally it's over, and yet we still get the results at 7 o'clock in the morning on our paper. Do you start writing it either way? Like as the deadline gets closer and closer?
You have to write what we call running. You have to lay down the groundwork with the bulk of a column, and then be ready to write it so that it can be easily adapted to whoever wins. It's no fun. It's awful. It's no fun. It's the worst. It is the worst. It's the toughest thing, and every sport's got things can change so quickly in any sport. Basketball, you can have lead changes 3 or 4 in the last minute. Baseball lead changes by the inning. But basketball is more instantaneous, obviously, and that's a nightmare. Hockey, you get late goals. And in fact, one the other night, the Bruins lost to a late goal, so you can have that. It's hard, and that's the hopefully that's the addition. There's the early addition, and you do rewrite for the final, but the final is not seen by the biggest edition. I don't know how it is now. I'm going to wait 4 years. I'm not sure what's going on now. But for the bulk of the years I wrote, the edition that had the most copies was one that was basically with a deadline somewhere between midnight and 1. It was shifting all the time, but somewhere in there. It was either the second or the third, depending on that one. And the one that for the 4th edition, which is like a 2 o'clock deadline, I used to call it, that's for the hotels and the airport, not many people saw that. And it's frustrating as a writer when you can't do the job you want to do, which is one reason, by the way, why one thing I mentioned in the book, people say, used to ask me, what's your favorite sport? The cover. And expecting me to say baseball, basketball, obviously with me. And I said, no, it's golf. A, I do like golf. B, it has to be played in the daylight. And therefore, you don't have the onerous deadline situation that you have with the other sports. The worst thing they can do to you in golf, and this is what they have done now, is to start the final 18 on a Sunday of a major at 3 Eastern rather than 2. That's about the worst thing they can do to you. But it doesn't ruin you can write what you want to write, the way you want to write it, more often than you can the other 3 sports. So much of think about the big events, World Series 7 night games, NBA all night games anymore, no more day games in the finals. Hockey all night games, no more day games. Football, the playoffs, very often games are at night. and bowl games very often are at night. The Super Bowl is actually pretty good because that starts at 6:25. Super Bowl is actually manageable. That's the one. That's the one good saving grace of all the huge sports events. The Super Bowl actually gives you a chance in the East to write the way you want to write. But it's very frustrating, and you know it's not your best work, and people see that. More people are going to see that one than the polished finished product with a beginning and a middle and an end. It's actually coherent, and so it's very frustrating. Yeah. Yes.
What sports writers did you enjoy reading in the past, and which ones do you like present day?
Obviously, growing up, the holy grail, the demigod was Red Smith. We all would, had to go with him. I grew up. The guy who influenced the business, though, on how we go about the business and who had tremendous influence and was a powerful writer, was Dick Young. The New York Daily News. He invented the modern game story. He's the first guy who went down to the locker room, and back in the 40s when you didn't do that in the old days, and demand some answers, about why the manager did this or why the guy did that. He changed the landscape as much as anybody. Locally, the great Ray Fitzgerald was not only a good friend, but a beautiful writer, a wonderful writer, obviously. And Lee Montville, when he was a columnist with us, I used to kid about Lee. I said, I don't know what Lee does, but he does it better than anybody else. His style was unique to him. Right now, though, there's a lot of good writers, but I am very staunch in my assertion that the best columnist in America right now is Mike Vaccaro of the New York Post, and absolutely touches all the bases. He has the best breadth of knowledge, the best feel for a fan, the best historical knowledge, and writing style combined of any writer writing. He gets it as well as any columnist could get it. He totally gets it, and I look forward to everything he writes. Yes, sir.
With your interaction with the players, is there any person or athlete that you still have a relationship for, that you almost idolize, or that you...
My favorite, there are 6 personality profile chapters in the book, and one of them is on Dave Cowens. And I just say that he's my favorite personality that ever covered. He's the greatest combination of skill, electrifying style, and personal approach. The most intellectually curious player I've ever encountered, which is not to say he's a raging intellectual, but he's curious, gets out of bed every day, and still does, I think, what's going to happen today? What can I learn today? What's new and exciting today? And most people aren't like that, and certainly few athletes are like that. Dave was totally sui generis. There was never anybody like Dave, on or off the court, for me. I was friendly with a lot of guys, John Havlicek, Paul Silas, particularly Paul Westphal, and Larry, but Dave was in a class by himself for an interesting person to cover, no question. I'm just trying to think of baseball, of course, you can't, you got to start with Bill Lee and with baseball. Because, he is generally funny. He is generally who he is. I think there's a lot of acting at times that he can embellish, but essentially, he's been the same, right down to the moment when he was actively running for governor. I don't think he won. But Dave Cowens was my ready answer. This one back over there.
Yeah, you mentioned Pete Rose before. I know Pete Rose did a terrible thing, really, for the game of baseball, which we all, like you, adore. But is there any room for forgiveness for him? He was such a great player.
Not for me. He had his opportunity for years and years to come clean. Didn't come clean until a book. As much as Pete Rose loves baseball, and he may very well love baseball more than any person on this earth ever has loved baseball, he loves gambling more. And I believe he loves gambling more to this moment. And you walk into any clubhouse, and you cannot ignore or miss the prohibition about gambling in 2 languages now. He bet on a team, yes, it was his team while he was managing, which is not a good thing either, and lied about it for God knows how many years. And that's why he's not on the ballot, and he's not on the ballot. And if they want to change it, the Hall of Fame, fine. But I don't have any sympathy for him. I really don't. But that's, it's a hot button topic. There's no question. But count me as saying no. He had his chance. Yes. No, they would actually, sir, no, go ahead.
You talked earlier about the characteristics of being a sports fan and the unknown.
Yeah.
Can, other than the Super Bowl that you just talked about, can you talk about maybe one of the greatest games that you attended where that emotion was just there and
Well,
explained?
there were so many, basketball was my number one favorite, just by this volume. And if you were anyone here at the Game 7 against Philadelphia in 1981, I'm not sure there was ever in Celtic recent history, but I didn't, wasn't here for, I got up here in '64, so I saw some Celtic games. But, so I don't know, I can't speak to anything prior to that. But I think that building was as emotional that day, in that game, in the last 5 minutes when they were coming from behind, and the whole totality of it. Once again, the context, Philadelphia, a great rival, and it was, I think that game for sure. Baseball games,
Can you just remind us a little bit about what happened in that game?
What happened was they were down by 9 points with 5 minutes plus to go. Game 7, they were coming from 3-1 down. They had won Game 5 in overtime. They won Game 6 in Philadelphia, and now they're going to run out of gas. They're down by 9. They haven't been playing that well. 5 minutes to go, and the referees put the whistles in their pocket and let them play from that moment on. I mean, it literally, not literally, but metaphorically, tell me, trust me. And on the last 10 Philadelphia possessions, they scored 1 point. And that point was on a free throw by Maurice Cheeks, which was probably a bad call. He didn't deserve it, but they deserved something after the other things that happened to them. Celtics became incredibly aggressive on defense. I'm telling you, fouling like crazy, no calls, they're getting the ball back. Finally comes down to the tie score, 89-89. Darryl Dawkins gets the ball. He goes up, gets hit by 2 or 3 Celtics. No call. Bird comes out with the rebound, does the left-hand side of the court, and then inexplicably, because he never did it before or since, pulled up and banked one in from 18 feet for the go-ahead basket. I asked him about it. I don't know why. He just felt like there was a thing to do. He was not a bank shot guy, but he banked that one. And the crowd, the whole game, and after the game, the people gathered out on Causeway Street and didn't go anywhere. The traffic was stopped. I thought that building shook that day, there's no question. But there were any number of other Celtic games. The famous Heat game in '84, Game 4 and Game 5 in June of '80, we had the Heat wave. We came back from LA. They won Game 4 to tie up the series. Come back to Boston. We have this heat wave, 97 degrees Fahrenheit when the game starts. No air conditioning in the garden. And the Lakers have got, they arranged to get some portable oxygen stuff. They got a mask. Kareem is sucking a mask on the sideline. And everybody's dying. I never saw so many people wear so few clothes at the Garden. Seriously. All the women are wearing halter tops and shorts and as little as they possibly could. It was 97 degrees inside the building when the game started. Larry Bird shot 15 for 20 at 34 points, 17 rebounds, and they won that game by 18 points. And it was mind over matter. That place was rocking. The crowd made it into a happening. They became a participant. They created an atmosphere that just completely spooked the Lakers. And they embraced this negative circumstance, made it a positive. Yeah, it was hot in here, but we're gonna act like we love it. And the Lakers couldn't handle it. There's a couple of examples. And there's another with baseball. The totality, I say in the book, my favorite baseball thing obviously October 1, '67. Anybody was there that day, that almost goes without saying. That was obviously the day the Red Sox won the pennant, beating the Twins. And we can go over that one chapter and verse, but I was there for that. But the games 4 and 5 in '84 against the Yankees, they're down 0-3, got beat 19-8 in Game 3. Now they're losing 9th inning, 1-0, and Rivera's on the mound. You know what happened, Millard drew a walk. Here comes Dave Roberts, the whole thing, stole second base, Miller singles. They go into the 14th inning, and Poppy hits a home run. And then we reconvene at the Fenway. Let's see, that was about 16 hours later. Both games ended on the same calendar day, because that game went past midnight, and Game 5 started at 5 p.m. And so, and they won that game in the extra innings. And the drama in that game was enormous, and Poppy finally won it with a single on a 10-pitch at bat off the Weiser. After Wakefield had passed ball the runner to third base, and Wakefield, by the way, was the victim of the home run the year before. Talk about context for a sports fan that doesn't exist at the art museum. Thank you. And just doesn't. Yeah, man, go Crawford here. We know that. Okay, that's it. Okay. And so I'm saying that's pretty pretty emotional there. And I'll give you one more. You know, the last game in Schaefer Stadium, the snow game, Vinatieri, the field goal. I mean, the drama of that game, you know, was pretty enormous too. But there's any number of them. And Bruins, you know, I'm sure Bruins fans could cite their own chapter numbers. Yes, Richard, yes, sir. Yes. Yo.
You had a couple of spots in your book where you explained how you came up and were asked to do the Olympics.
Yes.
Summer, winter, and so on.
Yes.
And you absolutely adored being there. Once you got there, as each Olympic went on, for people who haven't heard it, once you could summarize that.
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Thank you, because that was the big bonus of my life, my career, the Olympic experience. That wasn't something I counted on, planned for, or really had factored into anything I was going to do as a writer. I grew up watching the Olympics and reading about the Olympics, but it wasn't my first, I didn't get to do it until '92. So I'd been at the Globe for 23 years before I got to do an Olympics. And the only reason it came about for me was the Dream Team. And I made damn sure that I was going to be the guy to cover the Dream Team. You know, I put my hand up, and you know, and even though I wasn't even covering the Celtics then, I was a columnist. But I wanted to do it, and I thought I had earned the right to do it, and I deserved to do it, and well, they let me do it, and I went. But what happened was, and yes, I covered all the men's and women's basketball, but I got around. I fell in love with the concept of the Olympics. I fell in love with the rhythm of the Olympics and the pageantry and the international intrigue, you know, everything about it. And then I went to '94. I wasn't supposed to be going to the Winter Olympics. Dan Shaughnessy was. But sadly for Dan and his family, his daughter was diagnosed with leukemia in November of '93, and he wasn't going to be doing any traveling as they were taking care of her needs. And in '94 in February, so I was an 11th-hour addition to the team, if you will, the Globe team in Lillehammer. Well, Lillehammer was, by acclamation, along with Sarajevo, from what I gather, the greatest Winter Olympics ever. And Lillehammer was like a fairy tale village. 23,000 people. The Norwegians, their sports, they were doing great. And what they weren't winning, the Swedes were winning. And the Swedes and the Norwegians are like Duke and Carolina, or Ohio State and Michigan. So the atmosphere was fantastic. And the whole thing, and I learned about sports I didn't have any interest in before, like cross-country skiing, for example. And I just fell in love. Well, from that point on, I said, I'm in for the Olympics. And I went to 11 Olympics, 6 summer and 5 winter. And I loved them all. And I became, to where I covered, I tried, every time I'd go, I try to make sure I see a new sport so I could, get the feel of just some idea. That's great. So the Olympics are a very vital part of my career. I'm very grateful to have had that experience. Yes?
In your eyes, do you see any issues or complications within the sports media today? And if you do see any, what would you do to fix them, if you see any?
Well, the competition, between the standard print and...
Yeah, print. Like I know that has changed from your time to now. But if there are any problems within the sports media today, in terms of it was brought up earlier with Bill Belichick earlier, do you see any issues within the sports media today, or
intramural issues?
Or like media, or like how they...
Obviously there's a. Let's face it, newspapers are dying and are going to die, and the reason they're going to die is the internet and all the ramifications of it. It's a lot of people have a voice that maybe don't deserve a voice, but because of electronic media, anybody can get a blog, anybody can tweet, anybody can say what they want, and a lot of times what they say is confuse the participants confuse with the so-called legitimate media what they're saying. It's caused a problem. And then there's also a problem with talk radio and some of the stuff that you hear there. And people who are in the trenches and these other guys don't go and they're not accountable. They don't have to worry about anything they say, then going and facing people the next day. It's a whole different dynamic. So there is an inherent friction. Yes, there is. And not everywhere, every place. In some places it's easy to get people get along better, but yeah, it's caused a lot of problems, no question. Yes, sir.
You use the word experience a lot. Going to a game and just watching the game, getting involved in the game. How do you go to a pro game now, go to the Garden and watch a game? How do you get into the experience when they seem to make that night everything about everything else, not the game?
Well,
I don't.
I try to get beyond it as much as I can. Oh, it annoys me, obviously. But the reality is that the game's been given over to the marketers and for presentation. The game isn't enough in the eyes of the leagues and the owners, that they have to provide a game experience, so that if you don't win, people went out and had a good time. Now, this is, of course, the way minor league baseball has evolved over the years, to where the game is, you're lucky people remember who even played. I always say this about what you're talking about. I've been saying this, what I'm about to say, I've been saying for 15 to 20 years. I would love to give an exit quiz at the Garden on any given night. Exit quiz of everybody under 25. We'll pick a number, 20, 20, I'll say 25. But even, well, maybe it's not fair, maybe 20, but certainly 20. A, who just played? B, who won? And I believe that a frightening percentage of younger people who go to games now go for one reason, and that's to see themselves up on the big board. And that's the reason they go. And that's, yeah, we can talk about it. But that, there's a lot to talk about there. One more question, yes, sir. Yes.
You mentioned a few colleges tonight, Villanova and Boston College. Two-part question. Do you miss the old Big East from a basketball perspective? Are you envious of Villanova and the new Big East as a Boston College graduate? And is there any way Boston College can never get back to the Tom Davis, John Bagley, Michael Adams, Sweet 16, Elite 8
First
level?
question is, I was opposed to the idea from day one, though I was friendly and, I'm not buddy, but friendly and compatible with Gene DiFilippo. I objected. I told him I hated this idea from day one, because it was all about football hijacking basketball as it did. It's hijacked the ACC and hijacked the Big East right out of existence. In fact, yes, I was opposed to it from day one. Two, Villanova.
The new Big East.
The new Big East. Yeah, I mean, it's still a good league, and it boasts of the reigning national champion, but it's not what it was, obviously, and those great rivalries and all those things that would involve in some interaction, Georgetown and Syracuse together, and with BC and all that. People say, okay, the ACC's nice, we have Duke and Carolina coming here. That's fine. Yes, they will sell out the building even now with Duke and Carolina. They also sold it out with Georgetown and Syracuse. I mean, so I don't know, that's fine. Villanova. I'm very proprietary to Villanova. As I mentioned earlier, my father once worked there when I was 6 to 8 years old. I loved it. When I was a kid, I really would love to have gone to Villanova. So I saw my first Villanova game in 1952, so I'm happy for Villanova. And Jay Wright, by the way, he's a very rootable guy. You would love Jay Wright. He's a good guy. The last one. It's been done. It's been done. It was done when I was in school. It was done in the 70s with good teams. It was done in the 80s. They won the Big East. It was done in the 90s with in the Skinner era. Have things changed? Have the dynamics changed that dramatically in who they can recruit and how they're going about it, that they can't do it again? I hate to say yes. I mean, I hate to say that. I don't know. Is it simply a matter of, I hate to be nasty, but you just need a better coach. You just got to find somebody that can do it. I think the guy must be out there. I do. And if it's not Jim Christian, he's a nice fellow. I do like him, but it's not happening. It just isn't happening. And Steve Adazio, it's not happening. A little more than him. At least they have a defense, but we know that. You realize if they do beat UConn and Wake, they're bowl eligible. You're all lining up. You're all lining up for it. Save the pennies. So you can make that trip. Obviously, I'm pained. I'm pained as an alum and someone that, I might leave you with this one, just to show you how it was. And we all know how BC has fallen into disrepute. Okay. In my time as a disrepair, I shouldn't say disrepute. Still a fine academic institution. In my time as a columnist only, I covered winning football games of Boston College football teams in such locales as Tallahassee, Florida, Clemson, South Carolina, Provo, Utah, State College, Pennsylvania, and oh yes, South Bend, Indiana. And so I've seen it happen, and I cannot bring myself to believe it can't happen again. Thank you very much.